Welcome everybody. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about Star Wars Return of the Jedi. So this is a movie that I have procrastinated on actually reviewing for my channel, mostly because of the fact that I wanted to review this movie for you guys when I've actually seen the movie and had the basic plot points down so I can give you guys a fair and accurate review. This is one of my actual all-time favorite Star Wars movies, and it took me a little bit of a while for me to actually grow to actually like this movie. This movie stars Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo. You get Carrie Fisher back as Leia Organa, as well as Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian. This movie also stars Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca, and a lot of the returning characters from the other films in the franchise come as well. You also get Yoda, who makes an appearance in this movie as well. And why am I holding the Ultra Sabers Archon V2, which I currently have? Well, this lightsaber is based off of the movie hilt of Luke Skywalker's Return of the Jedi lightsaber, where you see sort of Luke Skywalker go to see Lord Vader on Endor, and he pretty much has a newly constructed lightsaber that he made based off of Ben Kenobi's lightsaber from the prequel trilogy films, pretty much Revenge of the Sith. You know, he's holding this lightsaber and everything, and you know, this is one of my favorite lightsabers from Ultra Sabers. I'm going to plug them once again, so if you haven't bought one of these yet, you should definitely do so. This movie sees the beginning of the film where you have Carrie Fisher. She's going after Han Solo. He's pretty much being held in captivity by Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt is this gangster that has been around in the film franchise before, especially with Star Wars A New Hope, but he's pretty much been sort of a minor character within the film, pretty much appearing as a cameo in the movies. And this time you actually finally get to see Jabba the Hutt as well as his palace. He's got these dancing girls that, you know, every once in a while, if they do not obey Jabba the Hutt, they eventually get thrown into the Rancor pit and eventually get killed. This happens to one of the slave girls that Jabba the Hutt actually ends up. She's an alien creature that is pretty much one of Jabba's, you know, most prized possessions, and she eventually, you know, disobeys Jabba the Hutt, trying to fight back at him when Jabba the Hutt requires her to do some dancing and stuff like that. It's implied throughout the extended universe that they more than the standard just dancing stuff within the Star Wars universe, but I will not go through with that sort of information in this current review. She's eventually killed, and then Leia Organa attempts to go all undercover and dressed up as sort of a member of the Empire and try and save Han Solo from the carbonite that he's been sort of encapsulated in. She eventually gets caught and captured by Jabba the Hutt, which Jabba the Hutt appears to have this gold metal bikini waiting for her, which when this metal bikini debuted in the Star Wars film franchises became kind of something that a lot of females wanted to wear, and I don't understand why that nowadays, you know, you have, you know, SJWs who've pretty much taken away sort of this gold bikini, because Leia Organa eventually kills Jabba the Hutt, and she eventually gets the strength through all the stuff that he's done to her to actually kill Jabba the Hutt while wearing this gold bikini. So I think that this is something that's actually empowering for women to wear. It's good looking on, you know, Carrie Fisher and, you know, all the other cosplayers that I would wear this. You know, this is even in sort of, I hate to say this, you know, pornos and stuff like that. So I don't know why females in general are kind of worried about boys seeing this, because, you know, it's really attractive and it's something that's actually empowering to women. Jabba the Hutt puts her in this slave bikini. Leia quickly becomes Jabba's prize and his most prized possession after the first alien Twilight girl, who eventually gets thrown in the Rancor pit. You see Luke Skywalker. He comes to try and rescue his sister from the captivity of Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt eventually realizes what he's dealing with, and that is a Jedi, and eventually throws Luke Skywalker into the Rancor pit, where Luke Skywalker has to use sort of his wits about him to try and kill the thing. He eventually does, and you see that scene where one of the Rancor handlers is actually upset that Luke Skywalker has killed his most prized possession, which is the Rancor monster. He doesn't really have anything besides that in order to kind of, you know, feel accomplished and stuff like that, so he's a little bit upset that Luke Skywalker has just killed the Rancor pit monster, and Luke Skywalker eventually gets away, which is not something that Jabba the Hutt is happy about. You know, Jabba the Hutt eventually puts him back into slavery and puts him on a skiff. This skiff is going to the Sarlacc pit, and that's where you get several scenes of Leia kind of looking out on her friends, which is Han Solo as well as Luke Skywalker. Han Solo just being frozen from carbonite. You also get, you know, Boba Fett in the picture, and Boba Fett gets a few more lines in this movie, which I thought was really cool that they kind of introduced him a little bit more in this film, whereas in the previous film in the franchise, Empire Strikes Back, he didn't really have that much to do. He was pretty much just the bounty hunter for Darth Vader, and, you know, Darth Vader pretty much used him as a pawn in his own schemes, whereas in this movie he's pretty much serving Jabba the Hutt as well as Darth Vader. They eventually go to the Sarlacc pit, where Luke Skywalker kind of looks down the Sarlacc pit, and they have that really cool line again, which, you know, see Skywalker is rather confident that, you know, he's going to make it out of this alive. He is pretty much taunting Jabba the Hutt several times in this movie, where he kind of, you know, does the whole little Leia when she's staring up at him. You get R2-D2 and C-3PO, who are pretty much Jabba the Hutt's slaves. He's pretty much delivering Jabba the Hutt, you know, drinks and stuff, and you get sort of the line in the movie where Jabba the Hutt's like, "You'll learn to appreciate me," and stuff like that, which, you know, Leia is rather disgusted by it. Fairly so, because Jabba the Hutt is actually a disgusting creature. Eventually, once Luke Skywalker leaps off of the skiff, he's pretty much put in a position where he has to leap off a plank. Luke Skywalker leaps back up off the skiff and takes his lightsaber, which is this lightsaber in the movie, swings it around several times and kills several of the guards that are chasing after him, eventually leaping onto another skiff. And this kind of gives Leia Organa sort of the strength that she needs in order to kill Jabba the Hutt by tying sort of a chain around him, which the chain was used on her as sort of a leash. And, she eventually kills Jabba the Hutt, which sends, everybody in a frenzy. Everybody's freaking out and stuff on this skiff, and Jabba's sort of floating barge is pretty luxurious and gangster sort of manner. This is something that, is dual layered and stuff like that within the Star Wars universe, and it's pretty much hovering over the Sarlacc pit. Luke Skywalker eventually makes his way onto the barge and eventually saves the day, capturing his sister Leia from Jabba the Hutt's guards and everything. And you still see her sort of in this sort of gold medal bikini, which has become sort of iconic in terms of the Star Wars, outfits and stuff like that. They eventually save Han Solo and stuff and eventually make it back onto the skiff, where some of the fighters are still trying to go after him, but they eventually make their getaway and escape. After Han Solo pretty much bests Boba Fett in this film, Boba Fett kind of goes out kind of like a bitch, where he gets knocked off the skiff and everything and kind of tumbles down in the Sarlacc pit. Now, it is pretty much told that in sort of the Star Wars expanded universe that Boba Fett actually escapes the Sarlacc pit. I don't know how he eventually gets out, but I haven't really read the extended universe books. I just know from experience of looking this stuff up online that he eventually makes his escape. And it'd be kind of cool that if they made a Star Wars movie featuring Boba Fett kind of explaining how he made his way out of the Sarlacc pit and kind of, had his own sort of journey afterwards, trying to hunt down Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, who kind of bested him kind of in a bitch way, where Han Solo just kind of smashes him with a spear and knocks him off and everything, which I thought was pretty much a bitch move, because, they could have had a really cool fight sequence between Boba Fett and Han Solo, and they chose not to do that in this movie, which I think if they kind of continued with the Solo Star Wars story route, they could have actually had a pretty convincing conclusion to that fight sequence that you see on the skiff. This leads Luke Skywalker to go actually back to Dagobah, where he's trying to go and train with Yoda. Yoda pretty much is old in this time period, and he's pretty much on his deathbed, and you actually get to see Yoda actually die, which is kind of heartbreaking to see, because at this point in time, Yoda is pretty much like Luke Skywalker's master after Obi-Wan Kenobi pretty much disappeared and became a Force ghost. You kind of have another scene between Yoda and Obi-Wan towards the end of the film, along with Anakin Skywalker and, everybody else in sort of the special edition versions, but at this point, it's quite unclear what happens to Yoda. He pretty much tells him that everything that he needs to know is pretty much stuff that he's been trained to deal with. Luke Skywalker is still convinced that he can save his father, Darth Vader, which is pretty much the most vile and disgusting sort of person in the galaxy, but Luke Skywalker thinks that he can actually turn him to the light side of the Force, and that's pretty much the mission of this movie. This entire movie is pretty much focused on a father-son sort of squabbling and stuff. You have Darth Vader, who's trying to still convince Luke Skywalker to join the dark side of the Force, where you have Luke Skywalker, who's trying to convince Lord Vader to go to the light side of the Force. And you see that throughout this entire movie, where you have Luke, Han, and Leia. They're trying to desperately try and get Darth Vader to go to the light side, whereas Vader's trying to hunt Luke down so that he can pretty much turn him and pretty much make him into the monster that Darth Vader is currently at this point in the film. That's also where on Endor you get that really cool scene where Luke is pretty much holding the lightsaber from this lightsaber hilt, and he's like, Darth Vader's like, it appears that you've constructed a new lightsaber. There's a lot of really cool one-liners in this film. You've also got Han and Leia, who are on their own mission to try and destroy the Empire. They have to go to Endor in order to destroy sort of this like communication array type thing, in order to allow sort of more forces to come and defeat the Empire, whereas they finally meet these things called the Ewoks. The Ewoks, while I know a lot of people really enjoy the Ewoks and enjoy them pretty much in the same way that they enjoy the Porgs, I am not that big of a fan of the Ewoks. I think it was a little bit of misdirection from George Lucas for putting the Ewoks in there, because they're pretty much these walking teddy bears that kind of kill the Empire with sticks and stones and like that. And I get kind of the message that anybody can pretty much defeat the Empire, and that was pretty much what George Lucas was going with in this movie, but I didn't really find it that fascinating. I thought it would have been a lot cooler if against all odds Han and Leia were pretty much teaming up with reinforcements from the rebellion to kind of destroy the Empire, which they actually kind of do in this movie, but not in the way that I'd kind of wanted or had hoped for this film to end. The Ewoks are one of the things like Jar Jar Binks that Lucas incorporated that did get a lot of flack, but there's mixed opinions on whether you like them or not. I'm not judging you if you actually like the Ewoks, because they were part of the George Lucas original trilogy, which I'm not a fan of the Porgs because they're part of Rian Johnson's film, but we're not going to be talking about in this review. So Luke and Leia eventually end up on Endor after Luke meets with Lord Vader. Vader meets with Palpatine. He is pretty much trying to seduce Lord Vader even further into the dark side and try and destroy his family, even though Vader still wants to have Luke kind of rule the galaxy alongside with him. They have this really cool speeder bike chase with the scout trooper on Endor, where you have Luke and Leia pretty much on the same speeder, and they're trying to fend off the scout troopers that are going after them. Luke Skywalker eventually gets the better of several of them with his lightsaber, which is the Return of the Jedi lightsaber that I'm holding in my hand right now. And you can see that really cool scene where he flips off the speeder bike vehicle and then slashes the scout trooper with it and eventually kills him, and see the giant explosion and stuff. And there's a lot of really cool action sequences within this movie. I think this is one one of the better sort of lightsaber duel sequences, where you have at the end of the film Luke Skywalker eventually meeting Lord Vader. He's still trying to turn his father to the light side of the Force, and Vader is, being sort of seduced by Sidious, and Sidious eventually finds out that there is another amongst them, and that is Leia, which Leia at this point in time is not known to have Jedi powers, but she is definitely Force sensitive along with her father. And Darth Vader doesn't actually know at first that, Leia is actually his child, but eventually throughout the movie in this fight sequence, you kind of reveal slowly that Vader and Luke and Leia are pretty much related in that way. Vader eventually threatens Luke Skywalker, his sister, in trying to turn her back into the dark side. That's where you get the scene where Luke Skywalker pretty much charges at him with a lightsaber and just starts whacking his way at Lord Vader and trying to pretty much beat him down in order to kind of beat him into submission. And you see sort of that he is kind of questioning whether or not he wants to continue to keep fighting Darth Vader. He doesn't know if he really wants to actually kill him, because that's what Lord Sidious wants. And Emperor Palpatine is like, good, trying to convince Skywalker to kind of use his hate to kind of destroy Vader, because that's how he's going to turn him into the dark side. And then that's where you get that really cool moment in the film where Luke Skywalker is pretty much like, I will never join you, and that, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. And you get that really cool line where he just kind of tosses his lightsaber aside, and then Lord Vader eventually takes Emperor Palpatine and throws him down the shaft, and then you see sort of that electrical burst and sort of that wave of energy that kind of flies out, and then see them pretty much save the day at the end. And then you sort of get that, in the special editions, that sort of scene where everybody's pretty much partying, especially the Ewoks and the rebellion, and you sort of see that Luke Skywalker and them have saved the day. You get that sequence at the end with Yoda, Anakin, and Ben Kenobi. It's a really heartfelt sequence that really, I think, concluded the franchise in a really great way, more so than I think that the sequel trilogy could ever do, especially with the newer films in the franchise. While I did like The Force Awakens, I did not like The Last Jedi. I think in my original review I was trying to convince myself that I actually liked it, but that'll be a different review for a different time. Maybe I'll re-review The Last Jedi at some point. But this movie is really good in terms of the hero's journey moment. This still continues with the whole Joseph Campbell and sort of the mix between, science fiction movies and stuff that George Lucas had seen as a kid and all the fantasy novels and stuff that he had read. For me, like I said before, this is the perfect conclusion towards the Star Wars franchise. And originally I did not like Return of the Jedi. I thought it was a really bad movie, as I think most people when the movie originally came out did, but I eventually grew to like this movie when I saw it as a kid. And this movie has pretty much stuck with me as an adult, and I think that this is one of the reasons why I picked up this lightsaber from Ultra Sabers, because this lightsaber really means a lot, because this is the lightsaber that Luke built after having the graphics lightsaber that was kind of handed down to him, which I kind of want to get as sort of a birthday present to myself since my birthday's coming up. But I'm really excited to kind of see if they try and beat Return of the Jedi, which I know they probably won't, even with J.J. Abrams kind of working with Disney and stuff like that. It's never going to be as good as Return of the Jedi. The one-liners in this movie is fantastic. The story of, Luke Skywalker trying desperately to get his father to come back to the light side, and eventually does so. And, you see that at the end of the movie, Vader reveals his helmet, and you see that there's actually a man underneath the suit, and he's not just a robot trying to kill people. And, he kind of explains to Luke that, he can't come with him even though he wants to, that he's too old and weak to be able to actually kind of fight with him anymore. And so he pretty much just stays on the Death Star waiting to die, which eventually does. And spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie, but at this point, I don't know why you haven't seen the original trilogy of Star Wars films, but this is why I'm going to give Star Wars Return of the Jedi an A+. Everything down to the visual effects, the storytelling, the revolutionary effects that ILM had created for this film, sort of the sound design, the music, all the actors doing a fantastic job. I think this movie definitely deserves an A+, so hats off to the cast and crew as well as George Lucas for creating this huge, expansive, franchise that I think inspired a lot of people to get into science fiction as well as, science-related fields and stuff like that. So that is my review of Return of the Jedi. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review, and as always, guys, rate, comment, subscribe for my future videos, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.